Now, this is the last part, and I'm going to talk about the reforms in religious affairs. As I have mentioned before, Mohammed bin Salman has publicly and repeatedly called for an end to religious extremism in the country. King Salman, after he became king in 2015, spearheaded a campaign to return the kingdom to a path of moderation and tolerance by accelerating efforts begun by the late King Abdullah to expunge extremist ideology and rhetoric from the kingdom's textbooks and classrooms. Moreover, Mohammed bin Salman has used Vision 2030, the blueprint for socio-economic transformation, to realign the education system with economic rather than religious imperatives. What I'm going to do now is talk about the role of religion in education specifically, and then I will skip over some materials, talk about the hidden curriculum right now, the challenges to the education reform that the country faces. Now, formal primary education in Saudi Arabia began in the 1930s. By 1951, the country had only had 226 schools, and there were 29,000 male students back in 1951. Those schools only accommodated boys at the time because society thought that women's education conflicted with their traditional and religious values, which typically forbade women from leaving the home unless in an emergency. Later, a pilot school for boys and girls was founded by the late King Faisal and his wife, Queen Iffat, in 1946 in Ta'if, in the city of Ta'if, which is not far from Mecca. It was unique because it was a boarding school that had girls among its students, but it was quickly shut down due to protests of the conservative factions of the country. By 1961, we jumped 15 years, the education system was expanded to include non-compulsory primary education for girls, and the country initially approved just 15 girls' schools for the entire country. Jump another 15 years, in 1981, gender parity was reached in the Saudi school system. That is, both boys and girls were obligated to go to school starting in 1981. Even though the Saudi education system incorporated art and sciences subjects, mathematics, history, English language, etc., the government insisted that the curriculum should prioritize the country's religious teachings. The educational policy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which was issued back in 1969, laid out this fundamental principle for education in the country. It stated, quote, that religious sciences will occupy a central place at every level of primary, intermediate, and secondary education, and that the Islamic culture will be a central subject at all levels of higher education. Now, arguably, after what happened in 1979 with the seizure of the Grand Mosque in Mecca and the coming of Islamic extremists, at least they try after the Iranian Revolution, these coincided with the influx of foreign teachers that were introduced in the country, many of whom were unfortunately members of the Muslim Brotherhood. They were in exile from Egypt and Syria. They came to Saudi Arabia and they influenced the Saudi educational system, not only as teachers on a practical level, but also as a major philosophical force that reconfigured the education system and the curricula. More specifically, they politicized the directorate's religious curriculum, transforming Unitarian Wahhabi quietism into political activism. This adaptation came to be known as the hidden curriculum, about which I will say a few more things in a second. So, Mohammed bin Salman now is in charge. He comes into power with his father in 2015, and he has to make a choice as to what we do. Now, what are the challenges to education reform, to the hidden curriculum? For Saudi Arabia, educational reform has traditionally presented itself as a conundrum in that The issue is both socio-religious and political. Islam is interpreted according to Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab teachings, an integral part in shaping the Islamic identity and the politics of Saudi Arabia. Because of this, there are large sectors of the Saudi public who will see any attempt to change the state's religious education system as a diminution of their Islamic identity. For example, the Ministry of Education made a decision in 2011 to integrate 6 modules of the religious curriculum into a single class. The move triggered so much anger among conservative teachers who considered it a war against Islam and a sign that the government was being swayed by Western demands. A local newspaper in Riyadh, Al Jazeera, was swayed by newspapers, quoted a number of people, including a female teacher, who described it as the reform, the 6 modules into one class. She called it a disaster and said it would lead the Muslim nation to abandon its religion and could result in the country's eliminating Islamic education totally or making it optional. Needless to say, this was a hysterical reaction. As a result of public pressure, however, the Ministry of Education ultimately decided not to proceed with the plan. They waited. Sometimes the position of some teachers on reform went beyond just resistance, but also took the shape of contributing to what is known as the hidden curriculum, extremist teachings not sanctioned by the state, nor found in state textbooks, but rather propagated by school teachers, administrators, and staff members, especially those ties with the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, for decades, as I've mentioned, Muslim Brotherhood teachers took advantage of the Saudi monarchy's openness to involve them in the creation of education institutes when there were very few other choices. Saudi Arabia accepted when the Muslim Brotherhood was being persecuted in Syria and in Egypt. Saudi Arabia accepted these teachers to come and integrate the system in the country with disastrous consequences, obviously. But instead of developing education discourse, these teachers imposed their own interpretation on religious dogma, which I remind you were very different from what Unitarian teachings were. This included grafting Wahhabi principles into political activism and promoting these ideas with students during schools' extracurricular activities. These hidden curricula deviated from Ministry of Education curricula in very subtle but important ways. For example, the curricula official called for teaching the Quran, including the concept of jihad. Jihad is misunderstood, okay? I'll stop here and explain because this is important. Jihad is usually understood as holy war, right? When you go to jihad, you holy war. But it doesn't mean just that. It also means your own jihad, where you excel. Your jihad is where you add value. You don't go to kill, but to improve yourself. That's the real jihad, where you excel, where you become something better. Well, obviously, the teaching of the Quran, the concept of jihad. But jihad in the Quran, there are 3 kinds of jihad. Jihad of the heart, sometimes called the greater jihad, which refers to an individual's believer's internal struggle against temptation, against sin. The other 2 types of jihad are external, sometimes called the lesser jihad. These include jihad of the tongue and the pen, debate, persuasion, etc., and jihad of the sword, which is armed struggle. Generally speaking, when you refer to jihad, it's only the last one that is understood. People don't pay attention to the first, which is permitted in the Quran, but only, even holy war, even jihad, is only for defense purposes. You have to, if you are attacked, you attack. But you don't go to war. In the classroom, many Brotherhood teachers elevated armed struggle against disbelievers above the other two types and presented it as a legitimate premise for the use of excessive aggression against non-Muslims. Therefore, even when the government rewrote how the concept was presented in textbooks to prevent misinterpretation, Muslim Brotherhood influenced educators and others with a conservative mindset continued to promote extremist interpretations that fed terrorism. Now, the hidden curriculum that I'm talking about hindered every attempt at reform. In the aftermath of 9/11, the attacks in the United States, the Saudi government moved to undercut extremist teachings by contextualizing some of the more complex concepts presented in textbooks. Chief among these was the concept, which is very controversial, of course, called al-wala wal-bara, loyalty and disavowal, which many teachers explained as granting the right to be hostile towards non-Muslims. Similarly, the concept of takfir was explained, takfir, T-A-K-F-I-R, was explained as the judgment that someone who was a non-believer was a kafir, a sinner. A Muslim extremist will think that I'm a kafir because I'm not a Muslim. But he doesn't know that I'm a believer. How can I be a kafir if I'm a believer? I believe in God. But in his eyes, I'm a kafir. And Christians are kuffar, the plural of kafir, kuffar. This is the extremist view, not the government view. This is the extremist Muslim Brotherhood people. Obviously, a kafir in Islam carries the death penalty, which is extremely dangerous, to say the least. I don't want to lose my head. I kind of like it attached to my body. Although in Islam, this concept has conditions and grades that do not result in someone automatically being expelled from the faith and cut off from being Muslim for minor transgressions, some teachers ignored the subtleties. This made students believe that a Muslim who committed even a minor sin deserved to be killed. It's worth noting that Osama bin Laden, for example, you all know who Osama bin Laden is, right? I don't have to tell you that. Of course, everybody knows who Osama bin Laden is. His war against the Saudi government was based on this, takfir. He justified everything that he did based on takfir. He accused those in the Saudi government of being non-believers. In other words, the king was a non-believer. He was a kafir. For Osama bin Laden, King Abdullah or King Fahad or King Salman and Muhammad bin Salman were all kuffar. They were all sinners because they had relationships with non-Muslim countries internationally. The fact that, for example, Saudi Arabia had relations with India. With India, 30 million gods and counting. Obviously, this is kuffar. You are kuffar. So this is the logic of these extremists, sick people. In 2011, King Abdullah took a critical step towards expunging the hidden curricula. What did he do? He suspended 2,000 teachers, which was the equivalent of 2% of the total number of teachers who were either sympathetic to ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all these alleged groups, but people who have propounded extremist viewpoints to their students. Others were sent for retraining. King Abdullah took 4,000 ulama, religious scholars, and sent them to school so that they can update themselves to the teachings of the Quran and the Sharia and the Hadith, etc., etc. You think that's easy to do? You try it. You try to take 4,000 religious people and send them to school, and I'll see what you can do. Even after the authorities weeded out those teachers, however, the bulk of the problem remained. Now, during the October 2017, I mentioned a few days ago that in October 2017, Prince Mohammed bin Salman had the Future Investment Initiative, the Desert Davos. That's what it was called, right? So in October 2017, he gave several interviews at that time. And what did he say? He said, I want to tackle religious extremism head on. Quote, this is Mohammed bin Salman. We will not spend the next 30 years of our lives dealing with extremist ideas. We will destroy them today. I will repeat this. We will not spend the next 30 years of our lives dealing with the extremist ideas. We will destroy them today. And he laid out a new vision. We only want to go back to where we were. The moderate Islam that is open to the world, open to all religions. Within 2 weeks, he ordered the arrest of dozens of hardline clerics. Many of the clerics who were arrested were alleged to have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. The kingdom banned the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, the Muslim Brotherhood is officially a terrorist organization, not just in Saudi Arabia, but throughout the Gulf Cooperation Council. And incidentally, there are no exceptions. All 6 member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council signed on the dotted line. The Muslim Brotherhood is considered to be a terrorist organization in the Gulf region. In addition to these initiatives, the kingdom banned radical Islamist publications from all its libraries and campuses and removed staff who propagated the hidden curriculum. Now, 2 years before the crackdown on these extremist clerics, that is in 2015, on the direction of the king, they began to shape policy and oversaw the first major step toward curbing the power of those religious elites who appeared to hold extremist views, when the government literally eliminated the role of the formidable mutawwa'in, the religious police, whose official name, as you know, is the CPVPV, the Commission of the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, CPVPV. The government also began slowly chipping away at the guardianship law, which was used to make women and girls subordinate to the authority of men, preventing their right, for example, to enroll in school without a male relative's permission. It goes without saying that diminishing the traditional guardianship rule has helped to eliminate many extremist social practices in the education system for girls and young women. For example, the Minister of Education approved a proposal from Princess Noura University, which is the kingdom's largest all-women university. Princess Noura University, those of you who go to Riyadh, when you arrive at the airport and you're driving from the airport to Riyadh, you will pass in front of Princess Noura University. It's a huge complex. It has 60,000 students, 60,000 students. It's a huge university, all female, to allow its students to leave campus without the permission of their male guardians, a decision that was opposed by the religious police before. According to the statement issued by the university, this decision was taken at the behest of the students. Incidentally, as a kind of anecdote, it might be useful to remember, when I come to JNU, I drive around. Of course, there are too many bumps to cross. so my stomach is not happy with all these bumps, but you're used to it, I'm not. But at Princess Noura University, there is a monorail system in the campus. To go from one building to the other, you take the train, and the monorail line runs all the time. To go from one building to the other, you take the train. Monorail system, very interesting. You can see it actually. It cost about $10 billion to build. $10 billion to build the university. One of the great accomplishments of King Abdullah. Now, according, as I said, to a statement issued by the university, some schools used to require female students to wear the veil, but in 2019, the Minister of Education made it explicit that university students were not required to wear a veil, although hijabs, which cover only the hair, are still required. Fundamentalist clerics have also been replaced by others with more moderate views to promote moderate Islamic values of tolerance and interfaith dialogue. The Secretary General of the World Muslim League, Muhammad Al-Isa, a very wise leader, has led a campaign starting in 2018 that advocates the need to neutralize political differences between Muslims and other religions and combat anti-Semitism. In fact, Muhammad Al-Isa did something that shocked the entire world. He went to visit the Auschwitz death camp in Poland, which was used during the Holocaust to murder Jews. That was a major show of tolerance, if there was one. As part of the campaign, he made a groundbreaking visit, as I say, to the concentration camp. Now let's look at the curricula itself, and then I will stop, so that people have a chance to ask questions. I know that everybody is anxious for the exam. Don't be anxious. You will all pass. You're good students, I can tell. Excuse me. You know, I've been sick for the past 3 weeks, and I was not sure whether I will be able to actually speak for 5 days all this time. But I was encouraged by all of you to keep going, even though I'm heavily medicated and I'm taking all these medicines, but my brain is still working. Alhamdulillah. Now, Saudi Arabia now has taken steps to amend the manner in which religion is taught in schools and to reduce the overall amount of classroom time dedicated to religious studies. It doesn't mean that religion has been dismissed. No, it's there. The Minister of Education has merged the religious classes of tafsir, the Quranic interpretation, with the Quran into one subject at the intermediate level, and similarly, the subject of Quran and Tawheed, the intonation, and Tajweed, the intonation, because intonation is important in Islam. The way you pray, the way you pronounce the words, the tone that you deliver, the delivery process is something you learn. You don't say, La ilaha illallah. You don't say that. Like some of you when you are asking questions. You're so timid. You don't raise your voices. You should be courageous. When you speak out, you say, La ilaha illallah. You say it out loud. There is a way of saying it, and you have to learn this, right? So they mix those together, starting at the 5th grade, as a way of reducing the hours devoted to teaching religion. The Minister of Religious Affairs has also banned Quranic schools from organizing any religious activities, such as visits to tombs organized to remind students of an afterlife and make them draw a lesson from death. Religious activities in the past had provided teachers with opportunities to advance extremist ideas. The new rules affect 771,000 male and female students that were enrolled in these religious institutions. And now they're limited religious study at these schools to Quranic memorization and Quranic intonation, tajweed. One educator of Islamic studies, who wished to remain anonymous, said that since 2015, the Ministry of Education has revised textbooks to explain the historical context behind the development concept of the takfir, for example, which I talked about earlier, sin, which still exists in the secondary level textbook Tawheed, but some of its rules and conditions are being explained. The textbooks also state that takfir is not permitted unconditionally. Now let me conclude. After 2015 and the heavy investments that were introduced now under Vision 2030, students now are being taught different modules. New modules are being introduced. One is critical thinking. No more rote learning. Critical thinking is being taught in schools. The other module is philosophy, to be taught at the secondary school. Imagine teaching philosophy at the secondary school to address the country's deficits in these areas after decades of rote memorization. Another break with the past, the Ministry of Education has moved from a standardized curriculum and now allows students a choice of electives, including classes in research and information resources and earth sciences. In addition, Saudi secondary and tertiary schools will offer now, are you ready for this? Chinese language training in order to prepare students to work in a globalized economy and also to forge closer economic ties between Riyadh and Beijing. Of course, they offer English as a secondary school, but now they're also teaching Chinese, and I suspect down the line, other languages as well. The beauty of Vision 2030's economic focus has revived opportunities for training for Saudi youth in new fields like tourism, event management, hospitality, and they're training young male and females in hospitality, in digital marketing, offering new opportunities, creating all kinds of jobs in the entertainment business, and so on and so forth. They even are allowing now foreign universities to open branch campuses in the country for the first time. Saudis who qualify, they don't have to go to Dubai in order to go to the New York University, Dubai. They can do it in Saudi Arabia as well. The leading universities in Saudi Arabia today, King Saud University in Riyadh, and the more prestigious King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah, the Imam Abdul Rahman bin Faisal University in Dammam, and probably the most prestigious of all the universities, the King Fahd University of Petroleum in Dhahran. They are now at global level universities, and without neglecting vocational training as well. Now, the current attempt to reform education system has been strategic, not only in an attempt to reduce the sheer number of extremist precepts in developing more market-oriented modules, but also by empowering moderate religious clerics to join in the historic approach towards education reform and promote humanistic and more Islamic-driven notions. It's a long process. It will take a long time. But it started, and that's good news. Before I answer your questions, as a final point, thank you all for spending the past 5 days with me. I hope I was not too boring. And I'm glad that you were all in the class. Thank you for attending. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. On the question of boring, I'm sure you are not boring because after every session, the major complaint has been that we didn't get to ask our questions.
Okay.
So if
Here's your chance.
yeah, so if that has to be an indicator of popularity, so that is there. Uh, very short questions, no comments, just very brief questions. Starting Surya Prakash.
Sir, after 9/11, Saudi's image has been severely dented. So, how Saudi is now improving its international image that it is itself, harmed by the terrorist organizations?
Good evening, sir. My question is that I read a book, Battle for the Soul of Islam, written by James M. Dorsey. So, in his first chapter introduction, he wrote, and I quote, that jihad cannot be the part of Islam, even though if Islamic law could justify it. So I would like to know your views to it. Furthermore, that several non-state groups, Islamic groups, use jihad, I mean, as a weapon for they claim that infidels and we have to wage war against them. And it make the negative image of Islam. So has anything mentioned that you yesterday you were dealing with the Islamic law interpretation and all these things? So that anything mentioned about it? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very insightful lecture during all the 5 days. But I have like 4 brief questions. Four, yeah. Sorry, I have been patient.
Start with one,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to the second one. Give me one first.
Okay. So you've asked you've told that there are now the unconditional takfir is prohibited, and if that is so, what are the conditions for takfir?
Conditions for what? For takfir. Takfir.
Should I ask in the next round? Yeah.
We'll come back. We'll come back to you. Don't worry. We'll come back to you. Since you have 4, you're entitled to 3 more. All right. The image of Saudi Arabia. First, the image of Saudi Arabia. Now, there is no doubt that Saudi Arabia had a very bad image a few years ago, especially after 9/11 and Jamal Khashoggi's assassination, and even before, the denigration of the Saudi system. In fact, at the King Faisal Center several years ago, you can access it if you are interested in reading what I wrote about the image of Saudi Arabia. I wrote a report on the denigration of Saudi Arabia. It's available for free. You just go to the King Faisal Center webpage and look at my publications that are listed there, and you can download it. Denigrating Saudi Arabia was very easy. At a time when, for example, in the West, the feminist movement made fun of the fact that Saudi women were not allowed to drive. They could not understand the whole mahram concept. Therefore, 9/11 occurred. Obviously, the reputation of Saudi Arabia was even worse than before. But you know what? Things have changed now. Saudi Arabia is regarded in very different terms, and Saudi Arabia is improving its image dramatically. It's not perhaps as ideal as it ought to be, but it is making a lot of progress. It is showing to the world that it wants to be part of the global village. It wants to be part of the international community. Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 is a positive step in that direction, right? I mean, he wants to make sure that the economy changes, that people are allowed, that Islam as practiced in Saudi Arabia is tolerant, and that it is going back to its roots, that it is open, that the Saudis are, I mean, if you deal with Saudis over a period of time, you really come across to appreciating what nice people they are. They of course, like in every society, they're idiots, you know. That's natural in every society. I'm sure in India, I think you have a few idiots here too.
If you have a fair share.
You have a few. You have a few. There are idiots in every society, but the majority of people are very nice. They're very kind, and the image is improving dramatically. Yesterday, Thursday, the newly elected president of the United States, Donald Trump, had a telephone conversation with Mohammed bin Salman, and they were talking about improving relations, business deals, and so on and so forth. Of course, Donald Trump being who he is, he concentrates on money. Don't get me started on him. So obviously things are going to improve in the future as well. Could be better, but a work in progress. Now, the question of jihad, as I've tried to explain, there are three kinds of jihad. And the most important is not holy war. Let me repeat that. The most important part of jihad is not holy war. The most important part is inner self-control, to stay away from sin, from temptation. Every time I see a woman walking down the street, I should not be tempted. That's my jihad. I should learn how to control myself. I should lower my eyes, and I should pass my way to respect her and to respect myself. Not just her, but to be away from temptation. That's what a believer does. You don't have to be a Muslim for this. Any religion. But that's the real jihad. Inner strength to avoid temptation, to avoid, a good jihadist is somebody who can control himself. Don't fall for this propaganda business that jihad is holy war. That's extremism on the other side. That's something that you have to pay attention to. With takfir, the interpretation of takfir is also changing. Was it yesterday when we were talking about legal reforms? When we were talking about, somebody asked me a question about why there are no temples or churches in Saudi Arabia, for example. And I mentioned to you, if I'm not mistaken, I mentioned it, that in fact, the government of Saudi Arabia turned down the key, offered the keys of an old church outside of Mecca, not far from Mecca, to the Lebanese Maronite leader that was visiting, a cardinal. He told them, this property now is a gift from the people of Saudi Arabia to you. You fix it. What does that mean? That means that there is a totally different view of takfir. That you're not a sinner. That you too can be a believer. That just because you're not a Muslim doesn't make you a disbeliever. It's, after all, Jews, Christians, and Muslims pray to the same God. There's only one God in monotheism. It's the same God. And he doesn't have horns on his head. Obviously, takfir is now changing. There is a different interpretation, a lot more tolerant. We will see what happens over the years. I think we will see dramatic changes in that level.
We'll take one more round,
Yeah.
shorter questions.
Now he has three there, but be tolerant. Allow him one more.
Okay.
Not three, because there are other people. So give him one more.
Start with the
Start with the ladies. Always start with the ladies.
Thank you, sir. My question is that Islam has played a role in Saudi's foreign policy, and within this pact, that the between the religious authority and the Saud family, there is somewhere in the foreign policy propagations, in religious propagations. So the religious authority shares some power. So in that the changing this changing notion of like moderate Islam, how it's gonna change all the dynamics within the Saudi and the foreign policy also. And if you look at the Saudi Iran rivalry in all these contexts, how this gonna change its foreign policy, the religious propagation in foreign policy. Thank you.
Sir, I want to know about the recent trend which is coming visible in Islamic countries, that is adopting modernity, and which is clearly visible in the Saudi Arabia under the leadership of Mohammed bin Salman. I want to ask how receptive are the majority of Muslims, both within Saudi Arabia and globally, the recent efforts by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to soften strict religious practices associated with Salafism, Wahhabism, of Unitarianism, and other traditional interpretation of Islam? And what challenges might arise in the process of adopting these changes?
Give him one more. Give him one more. He's a decent guy. He's a decent guy. You're allowed one more. Go ahead. Take the best of the three.
Yeah. So, you've told you've
Speak close to the
yeah.
to the
You've mentioned about takfir, and you've mentioned all the people of the book. So this question is about the people who are not of the book. And I would like to mention that you've told that India has 30 million gods. It does, but the fundamental philosophy of all religions in India is Unitarianism. And the people of the book do not get it. There's no dialogue. So what will Saudi Arabia or any what the Vision 2030, like without there's no development with, we are neighbors, right? West Asia and the subcontinent are neighbors. Without any dialogue, there won't be any prosperity.
I got it.
So I wanted to ask that.
I understood what you're trying to get at. I'm relatively intelligent. I understood. And I'm going to start with this. King Abdullah, a few years ago, King Abdullah became king in 2005, and he died in 2015. He had a dialogue with the Christian world. He went to the Vatican and he met with the Pope, and he had dialogue going on. But you're correct in saying that most of the contacts have been with the monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But when just before he died, King Abdullah embarked on a brand new experiment with non-monotheistic religions as well. They created, the government of Saudi Arabia and the government of Spain created a new institution called KAIICD in Vienna originally, the King Abdullah Institute for Dialogue, for International and Interfaith Dialogue, which included non-monotheistic religions. It included Hinduism, it included Buddhism, it included Shintoism, it included all kinds of religious institutions. Now, you can go online and find out about KAIICD, and the headquarters moved from Vienna, Austria, to Lisbon, Portugal now, for financial reasons. And this was done at the time when King Abdullah was the ruler. So therefore, there is an awareness that this dialogue has to occur with others, not just monotheistic religious believers. Not only that, something even more important, this discussion about religious dialogue was part of a series of national dialogues inside Saudi Arabia, whereby clergymen, both monotheistic and non-monotheistic, were invited to attend interfaith dialogue between different communities. So therefore, a major step was already taken in this respect, the fruits of which will probably become evident in the decades ahead. Look, as I have said a number of times, you've grown up. You can understand that these kinds of things take a long time. So be patient. You will see the results over the next generation. It will take a long time, but the dialogue has already started. Now, there are challenges with other Muslims, whether it is Salafism, whether it is in other countries, especially Iran, with which there are clear ideological differences as well, because the Iranians, even though they're fellow Muslims, technically there should not be any disputes within the Muslim family, but it's a political struggle for power, for regional power. Iran is a big country, it's a powerful country, 100 million people. It has a rich history, and it has a presence in the Gulf region, which they call the Persian Gulf. The Saudis call it the Arabian Gulf. So there is a lot of competition between them. Inevitably, there will be clashes between these institutions, between these countries. Make no mistake about that. But as far as I know, when a Saudi Shia goes to Qum or to Mashhad in Iran to perform their religious rituals and so on, nobody bothers them. And when Shias from Iran come to Mecca, if they are peaceful pilgrims, nobody bothers them. But when these same people start demonstrating in Mecca and saying, down with the Al Saud, and Mecca and Medina are occupied territories, then you have problems. Ayatollah Khomeini, may he rest in peace now, was not a man of peace. Was not a man of peace. I mean, I am being very diplomatic, and that's the mildest thing that I can say about the man. That's the mildest thing, nicest thing that I can say about the man. He incited people, and there were demonstrations in Mecca. Several hundred people used to die with these demonstrations. The Saudis will not tolerate that kind of dissent. They will not tolerate that kind of. Why should they? Why should they tolerate it? Think about it technically. The Iranians would like to take Mecca and Medina away from them. They say that Mecca and Medina should be under the control of the international Islamic community. What nonsense is that? What is this nonsense? It's like, for example, saying religious shrine in Hinduism in Delhi should be under the control, God forbid, of Pakistanis. Would you like that? You wouldn't like that. So same thing. Your question about religious propagation and foreign policy. As far as I know, religious propagation in foreign policy is not something encouraged. The Saudis don't go around saying to any country, Saudi Arabia is a big financial aid donor. Per capita speaking, after 1973 and the increase in price of oil, Saudi Arabia on the average has given between 1 and 3% of its GDP every year for foreign aid. To give you a comparison, I'm sure you already know this, but just to remind you, compare that with the most generous Western countries like Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Those are the most generous countries. The United States does not even qualify. Britain does not even qualify. The most generous are the Scandinavians. They give 0.7% on the average in terms of foreign aid. The Saudis have been very generous, and they don't just give to Muslim countries. They give lots of African countries, they give to Asian countries a lot of money, and not one of them is conditioned on religious propagation. Not one of it. They don't say you have to believe like we do in order for you to get the money. No, they've never said that. It's based on the need. If they want to build, if a country, let's say India wants to build a whole bunch of wells in Uttar Pradesh, let's say, and they apply for the grant from the Saudi fund. It's based on the merit of the project. If the project is considered to benefit a lot of people, they will give you the money. And they don't say, you better become Unitarian. They never say that.